Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Bhagirivaradha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Bhagirivaradha Yashoda Nandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Radha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Bhagirivaradha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Bhagirivaradha Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jamuna Tera Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Asto Tarsat Śrīmad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Namo Vishwadaya Krishna Stabile Smati Bhajam Babile Janamane Namo Vishwadaya Krishna Stabile Smati Bhaktivedanta Swami Janamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Prachana Namaste Nibadi Pascha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 10, Maharaj Rahugana meets Jad Bharata. Text number 5. I'll read the Sanskrit. Samsāgiko dosha evununam ekasyapi savesham samsāgikanam bhavitum arhatiti nishchitya nishamya kripanavacho raja rahugana upasita bridho pi nisargena palat krita ishad utita manyur avyas Pashta Brahma Tejasam Jata Vedasam Eva Rajasa Vrita Matir Aha. King Rahugana could understand the speeches given by the carriers who were afraid of being punished. He could also understand that simply due to the fault of one person, the palanquin was not being carried properly. Knowing this perfectly well and hearing their appeal, he became a little angry, although he was very advanced in political science and was very experienced. His anger arose due to his inborn nature as a king. Actually, King Rahugana's mind was covered by the motive passion, and he therefore spoke as follows to Jad Bharata, whose Brahmana effulgence was not clearly visible, being covered like a fire covered by ashes. Purport: the distinction between Rajoguna and Sattva Guna is explained in this verse. Although the king was very upright and advanced in political science and governmental management, he was nonetheless in the mode of passion, and therefore, due to a slight agitation, he became angry. Jad Bharata, despite all kinds of injustice endured because of his deaf and dumb display, remained silent by the strength of his spiritual advancement. Nonetheless, his Brahma Teja, his Brahmana effulgence, was indistinctly visible in his person. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadatisva Pedantikam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Lankayate Garim Yat kripa tamaham bande Sri Gurum Dinatarinam. The distinction between Rajaguna, who represents Rajaguna in this conversation? The king. Who represents Sattva Guna in this conversation? Jadbharata. So there's a comparison or a contrast. By dint of comparison, there's a contrast between the two. What is the symptom that identifies Maharaj Rahugana as being influenced by the mode of passion? What is the characteristic? Huh? Huh? Yes, he was a king, but what symptom did he manifest that Prabhupada identifies as showing he's under the influence of passion? He became angry. Yes, he became angry. And what is the symptom of goodness that's manifest in Jadbharat? He was a what?
He was tolerating.
He tolerated. And what was the symptom of his tolerance? Compassion. Doesn't say that here, does it? Where'd you get that from? Okay.
He was a footman.
What was he doing? What did he do? What was the symptom of his goodness? No. Yes, but what was he doing or not doing? Give you a hint.
He was not replying.
He's silent. Prabhupada says he's silent. I'm testing you whether you listened or not. And just repeating what Prabhupada said. Right, so slight agitation, got what? Angry. Was being criticised. Right? All of the palanquin bearers were being criticised. Right? And some of them were protesting. Oh, it wasn't us. We didn't do it. Which is fairly common. But Jadbharat, even though he was being criticised, what did he do? He's silent. Just tolerated it, but he was silent. Matras pasashtu kuntaya sitoshna sukudukadaha agama payano nityas tangs tatikshava bharata. Right? One has to tolerate the coming and going. Right? There's always coming and going in the material world. And a transcendentalist acknowledges the temporality of material existence and just lets it pass. You know, sometimes you're being praised and sometimes you're being criticised. So what should be the response?
Becoming angry and fight with everybody.
What's that?
Becoming angry and fight with everybody.
Yeah, become angry and fight with everyone. No. No, a transcendentalist is equipoised. Right? Equipoised. What is it? Jaya jayo labha labho. In victory or defeat, in profit or loss, we have to be equipoised because everything, you know. And the tendency is, especially for those in the mode of passion, is to be looking forward to the future. You know, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? And then when we don't get what we want or expect, then we get upset. But the transcendentalist is generally, because this reminds me of a pastime where a king also became angry. Right? Now, in some cases, it's appropriate for the king to get, and you'd have to say, if you were the king and you're being carried on your palanquin and your servants were upset, shaking around, and how else would a king respond? And the king has a responsibility to correct the citizens. It's his service. Just like it's the service of the guru to correct the disciple. It's his service. If the teacher doesn't correct the students, then we can't criticize the teacher for correcting students. Right? Even Prabhupada got angry with his, when Guru Das and the devotees in Vrindavan couldn't, and they promised Prabhupada that they would have the Krishna Balaram temple ready for Janmashtami, was it? 75? Wasn't it? Something like that. What was it? Ram Navami. It wasn't ready for Ram Navami, right? In 74. Was it 74 or 75? Because it was around about the time that Melbourne temple was opened. Yeah. And Prabhupada was not at all happy. In fact, because they were telling him, when Prabhupada got there, they were just saying yes, yes, yes. And when Prabhupada got there, he realised this is not going to happen. And of course, he was inviting people based on their recommendation, and so Prabhupada was very disappointed. And he showed his disappointment. Right? So, there are occasions where the king could be expected to be concerned, shall we say, concerned about the situation. Of course, Prabhupada's making a point here that Maharaj Rahugana was an expert king, and so should have known how to manage his palanquin bearers without getting angry. It's a small time, hey, whatever. Well, but he got angry. And Jad Bharat was equipoised, steady, silent, peaceful, despite the agitation of the king. He remained undisturbed. So this reminds me of Maharaj Parikshit. Right? Maharaj Parikshit was a exceptionally pious king. He was protected in the womb of his mother, Uttara, is it? Yeah, Uttara, by Krishna himself. Right, so he had darshan of Krishna when in the womb of his mother, and this is why it's called Parikshit, because he was always looking for that. Whenever he met somebody, he would check to see if that person wasn't that that individual who appeared to him within the womb of his mother. A great devotee, right? A descendant of the Pandavas, and so coming from an illustrious family of exalted associates of Krishna. So he was a great devotee and a very steady, determined, equipoised character. But yet, when he went to Samika Rishi's ashram, you can see this rajasic nature in the Kshatriyas or in the kings. When he went to Samika Rishi's ashram and wasn't greeted appropriately, he became angry. Similar, right? Similar. And in his frustration, he garlanded Samika Rishi with a dead snake that he happened to see. Right. What's that? If you garland somebody with a dead snake while they're in meditation, what's that called? What would you call that? Insult. Exactly the word I was. It's the insult. If you garland anybody with a snake, what is it? And interestingly, Samika Rishi's response was, he took responsibility for precipitating that action because he didn't receive the king properly. Right. He's a Brahmana. He understood the principles of religion, and he knew that the king should be respected and honoured and at least given a seat. And, when a guest comes, Prabhupada explains, when a guest comes to your house or to your ashram, you give them a seat and some pleasant words and a drink of water. This is a minimum we should offer. This is respect, right? Offering of respect. And so he took the responsibility. And of course, Maharaj Parikshit regretted as a saintly king, he regretted his action. He regretted his garlanding the king with a snake. But interesting to see Samika Rishi's son. Right. And this is how Kali entered. This is how Kali entered through the son of a Brahmana who was not as qualified as his father. Even though he was born as a Brahmana, he's relegated, if you like, to the category of Dvija Bandhu. Right, Dvija Bandhu. Not qualified. But still, due to association, he was powerful. Due to training and culture, he was powerful. So he could curse Maharaj Parikshit to die within 10 days, wasn't it? Something like that. 7 days, yeah. And of course, that then precipitated the presentation of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam by Sukadeva Goswami. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see how Maharaj Parikshit was justified in his dealing with the Brahmana, but also due to that influence, subtle influence, if you like, was like Maharaj Rahugana, somewhat like Maharaj Rahugana, not exactly like, but was, pushed, if you like, by that mode of passion. It's a characteristic of the Kshatriyas, of the kings. And of course that's required in order to do the service of a king. There has to be a bit of tejas or Shaurya, some potency has to be there in the character of the king or the administrator, the Kshatriya. And that characteristic or those qualities used in the service of the citizens, in the service of the state, in the service of the brahmanas even, and ultimately in the service of Krishna is appropriate, not inappropriate. It's appropriate, right? We should use all of our talents and qualities in the service of the Lord. And the Kshatriya or the kings are chosen in considering those qualities so that they're appropriate for the job. Right? So, it's not unusual that a king who's influenced or has that Rajaguna quality to exercise their anger, if you like, or their frustration even. There may be some frustration in the citizens because they're not behaving properly. And so therefore that frustration or disappointment even in the behaviour of the city, and here we see that with Maharaj Rahugana, and we see it with Maharaj Parikshit, is not a disqualification of a king, of a Kshatriya. It's actually desirable. A king has to be able to chastise the citizens. Right? He may need to on occasion. The palanquin's wobbling around all over the place, and the king's got to straighten out his chelas, right? The servants. Of course, probably inappropriate to get very angry to solve a small problem like this. And in Maharaj Parikshit's case, probably inappropriate to garland the Brahmin Rishi, the very saintly person, with a snake. But it was, at that time, the influence of Kali was starting to manifest. And that situation allowed the personality of Kali to take his influence in the behaviour of a Brahmin, of a Dvijabandhu, the son of a Brahmana, who then cursed Maharaj Parikshit. But of course we then see, despite that really minor discrepancy of Maharaj Parikshit, we then see his wonderful saintly qualities in his accepting the curse, tolerating the curse of the Brahmin, which he could have counteracted, could have easily. But he didn't. He took it as an arrangement of the Lord. Prabhupada explains how Maharaj Parikshit accepted the curse of the Brahmin boy and that he would be protected by Krishna because of his experience in the womb. He knew that Krishna would protect him in any circumstance. And so we see in Maharaj Parikshit's character the ability to fast and to sit until such time as the curse would be fulfilled, hearing the recitation of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam in the association of pretty much every saintly person in the universe at that time being present. that was the end, pretty much well, not entirely the end, but that was the beginning of Kali Yuga pretty much at that point in time. Actually, Kali Yuga began when Krishna left. That's actually and all of these things, the cursing of Maharaj Parikshit occurred at pretty much the same time. So, we see some of this Brahma Tejas, saintly qualities and saintly character in Maharaj Parikshit. It's an interesting combination. We see the influence of the Raja, and we see all of these very, very saintly characteristics and saintly qualities. And so therefore the conclusion of the sadhus and the mystics and the devotees is that situation was an arrangement by Krishna. That Maharaj Parikshit became angry and garlanded Samika Rishi with a snake. That was all Krishna's arrangement, so that the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam could be presented, so that Krishna would be manifest in a form of the words spoken about him in the form of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. Whereas here, Maharaj Rahugana's behaviour is pretty much described as just a material reaction. But interestingly enough, or similar to the situation of Maharaj Parikshit, Jad Bharat's able to give all of this instructions for the benefit of us all, effectively. Because Jad Bharat's instructions to Maharaj Rahugana take up quite a significant part of the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, certainly in the 5th canto, in which he's then given spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge. So it's auspicious that Jad Bharat is or has been enlisted as a palanquin bearer, although not a very auspicious position in society. You know, it's basically you're the lowest of the Sudras if you're a palanquin bearer, right? That's pretty menial kind of work. But in that situation, in those circumstances, Maharaj Rahugana is to be blessed by Jad Bharat's instructions. And of course Jad Bharat is creating a disturbance because he doesn't want to kill. He's being respectful to all of the living entities and especially the ants on the path. He's trying to avoid stepping on the ants. Right? So as a consequence, despite becoming angry, Maharaj Rahugana is going to receive the mercy of Jad Bharat in the form of his transcendental instructions. So, does anybody have any comments on anything here? Loudly. I can't hear. Especially they've got that fan on in the deity room, which I don't understand why we have that there, but anyway. We've got an AC. That's okay.
You mentioned about the curse.
Mentioned about the
Curse. Yeah, so Maharaj Parikshit was cursed, and you mentioned that he could have counteracted it.
well. That's what the Bhagavatam says. What Prabhupada says.
My question is it possible to counteract any curse?
Is it possible?
Yeah. To counteract.
I don't know. I would think so, but I don't know. You've been cursed recently?
Because is there any pastimes? No, is there any pastimes where we hear that that a certain curse has been counteracted?
Yes. There's a story of Buddhimanta Khan. You know the story of Buddhimanta Khan? He was the teacher of the Nawab when he was a young boy. And he, on one occasion, he was the teacher and the Nawab was a student, and as a young boy, he hit him with a cane and he cut his back. And later on, the wife of the Nawab, when he was the king, saw that cut, that scar, and she said, "Who did that to you?" And he said, "My teacher." So she wanted to know, who was the teacher? He said, "Well, Buddhimanta Khan." So she said, "I want him to be killed." Right? How dare he, strike the body of the king, who's like the representative of God. This is a big offence. This in her mind. The Nawab was mortified by this request, because he was a teacher, I was a student, I was misbehaving, he hit me, I deserved it. This is slightly different culture to what we might see in the world today, right? Although I have seen, I've seen it. I remember there was one devotee here, he was a senior, and he got upset by one of the younger, by something going on, and he slapped one of the younger boys, both Bengali, both from the same culture, right? And the younger just accepted it. He just took it, got slapped. Okay, he's a senior. What to do? What do? Don't show any resistance to a senior, right? Although the senior wasn't appropriate. he overreacted to the situation. So anyway, Buddhimanta, the Nawab didn't want to chastise Buddhimanta Khan. Didn't want to, because he had affection for his teacher. And if you have affection for your teacher and the teacher chastises you, you accept that as a show of affection, that he cares for me. Right? So he had a dilemma, He didn't know what to do, because he didn't want to kill Buddhimanta Khan for such a minor indiscretion. So he had to think of it, and so he thought, okay, and so in those days the Muslim kings, or the Muslim kings would convert the Hindus into Muslims by sprinkling water on them and chanting some curse or whatever. Curse, we're talking about curses, right? So the Nawab arranged it. He said, rather than kill him, he thought of a way to destroy his identity as a Hindu, which is good as killing him. Right? So Buddhimanta Khan was converted into a Muslim. Right? And so he was like, what do I do now? So he went to one Brahmin, and the Brahmana told him, you have to drink a litre of molten gold. Or lead or whatever it was. So then he went to another one and said, you have to, the only prayaschitta that you can perform to be freed from this is drinking molten lead. Right? So Buddhimanta Khan was, then I am going to be dead. So then he went to Lord Chaitanya and he said, what will I do? Lord Chaitanya just said, just chant Hare Krishna. Forget about it. Right? Just forget about it. Chant Hare Krishna. So, yes, there is a solution. It's very simple. Chant Hare Krishna. But yeah, you'd be unfortunate to be cursed. You're a devotee, so what's the problem? Unless you become a manager in ISKCON, then you may be cursed. But that's a manager anywhere, not just because you have to make decisions. Right? You have to make decisions. You can't be namby-pamby. Right? There are devotees who try to make friends with everybody, but then you're friends with no one. Better to make a stand on principle, and people will dislike it. Right? Is that right, Prabhu? Make a stand on principle and they won't like you. And so we have to avoid, if I stand up against this person, they might do something to me. Well, hello, that's life. The better to stick to the principles that Prabhupada wanted us to uphold rather than just try to be friendly with everybody. Why be friendly with rascals? Or if somebody is, because devotees are generally not rascals, but sometimes within their character there'll be some misbehaviour. So we have to stand up against that. And people won't like it. I remember when I became the temple president, there was at least half a dozen devotees who left the community because I was the temple president. Have a guess what? They came back. And some of them apologised also. I remember. Ananya Bhak. None of you might remember. Ananya Bhak was he was a very dedicated servant of Srila Prabhupada, and he loved to distribute prasadam. Right? And, for a long time, he would rise in the morning, he would do Mangalarti, he would bathe Gaunitai, he would then chant some rounds, and he would go into the kitchen, he'd cook for Crossways, he would then, he was a member of the breakfast club with Korma and co. So at breakfast time they'd have a break and honour the Maha. But then he would keep cooking, he would load up the van himself, he would then drive downtown and stay in Crossways all day. Right, so this is from Mangalarti till 4 or 5 o'clock. He would just work flat out. We have... Anyway, I won't say that. That's it's a good joke, but maybe not. Somebody might not find it funny. But anyway, what he was doing was, he was keeping some of the take and stashing it. Because he wanted to improve Crossways. But we wanted the money. We wanted the money. Would you believe? The temple also needed the money. And so there was tension between me and him. But and eventually he left. He left, went to Perth, but came back interesting story, Ananyabhat. He came back and he was working in Kodak with another devotee. I've forgotten his name. But anyway, Ananyabhat. And then, but one day he came to the temple. He used to come to the temple. First of all, he wasn't coming to the temple, but then he came, started coming. And he apologised to me. He said, Aniruddha, he said, I want to apologise because, I was giving you a hard time and you didn't deserve it. So he was... And then he got a brain tumour, brain cancer. And eventually he came to live in a house next door to the temple. He didn't have anybody to look after him. He and his wife had separated, and a little bit of tragedy there in his life. And but he accepted it. He took it as Krishna's mercy, and we looked after him until the time that he had to go to. He was in the hospice, the hospice in Hughesdale, I think it is, or is it Parkdale, just down the road. And Ananyabhat loved prasadam. He loved prasadam. And we used to bring ice cream to him in the hospice, because he had a fever and he couldn't talk. In the end, he couldn't talk. But he loved ice cream. And we'd feed him the ice cream and he'd go, He loved prasadam, I tell you, this guy. And he loved having his feet massaged. And he eventually left his body in the company of the devotees. And very auspicious, actually. He accepted it. He didn't, he took the curse, if you like. So anyway, not sure how I got onto Ananyabhat. How hard he worked, and how, he, even though he and I had a personal bit of a tussle over the money, he accepted that it was appropriate for me as a temple president to see, determine how the money was spent with the treasurer, and that he was actually, in one sense, he was stealing money, even though he wanted to use it for Krishna. So I stood up, we stood for that. He didn't like it, but so when you stand up for something, you'll find that on occasion you'll make friends or you'll make enemies. But so long as it's principled, the devotees will value you being principled. Right? So anyway, Buddhimanta Khan, not Buddhimanta Khan. Anyway, yes, Buddhimanta Khan got the mercy of Lord Chaitanya and ignored the curse by just chanting Hare Krishna. Anything else? Prabhu. Oh, hang on, Priya. We gave it to Priya. Sorry, Priya. When I get caught up in my stories, that I completely forget where I am. Sorry.
With Shringi, the Brahmana boy,
yes,
who cursed Parikshit Maharaj, was it justified because the Shastras say that if one is insulted personally, then one should tolerate that. But then if the devotee is insulted, then one shouldn't tolerate that.
Well, he his father was belittled, belittled. But the response was over the, And the father was completely disgusted by the behaviour of the son, right? So inappropriate, totally inappropriate, and he's the king. He had the right to chastise his citizens, and also the Brahmana was, demonstrating the principle of tolerance, mode of goodness, which is manifest here by Jad Bharat. He was tolerant and regretful of his behaviour. So it requires finesse, I suppose. It requires an understanding of the nuances of a situation to know when to react strongly and when not. And Samika Rishi understood that, the Brahmin boy didn't. Maharaj Rahugana understood it but wasn't able to act with restraint in dealing with these palanquin bearers, right? And so he started shouting at them, which was inappropriate. So, it requires a little maturity and appreciation of the details to know when to act with anger or, with force, if you like, or to act with restraint. That requires maturity. But generally speaking, yes, if we're being attacked or criticised or whatever, we have to tolerate it. And that's what Jad Bharat demonstrates. Press the button.
Sometimes we make a plan for like an improvement of the temple or for Krishna consciousness, spreading Krishna consciousness, and we go ahead with the plan. Sometimes the plan doesn't work out even after we start the plan.
Yeah.
We spend the temple money and many things. In the beginning we say, oh, it's Krishna's arrangement when it's going well. But then it doesn't happen, then we say, then how do we know that it's Krishna's plan? So it happened, many times.
Yep. So what's the question?
So how do we
work out what's Krishna's plan?
Yeah, what?
Well, everything is Krishna's plan if you want to look at it from a very elevated perspective, from the Uttama Adhikari's perception, right? We could say everything's Krishna's plan. But as a Madhyam Adhikari, we're a preacher, and so, we're trying to push on the movement, and there will be obstacles which can be seen as impediments, and there will be favourable winds that blow and things become successful. Which reminds me of, the fight that Prabhupada fought for Juhu, ISKCON Juhu. Even his disciples disobeyed him and gave the property back, right? Tamal Krishna Maharaj gave against Prabhupada's instructions, right? Radhacharan told me that Tamal Krishna Maharaj told him, that he chastises him for the things that he's done wrong. But he does that because it's his duty. And he told Radhacharan, he said, the mistakes that you make are insignificant to the mistakes that I made. Right? And he said, you know, I'm just one of the boys, like you. I'm just one of the boys. But I also happen to be your spiritual master. And so therefore I have to take on this responsibility. So Prabhupada embraced that challenge with great enthusiasm, right? You know, and was distressed when things didn't follow the course of action that he anticipated, and keeping in mind that Prabhupada had seen this land when he went to see Sumati Moraji to arrange his ticket to go to the West. And Prabhupada thought then this would be a good place to have a temple, right? And he met so many obstacles. You know, the devotees didn't like the place. When they went there, they didn't like the place. What are we doing here? You know, because Juhu was not central Mumbai when you Bombay when you think about it. But Prabhupada embraced all of those almost impossible situations. You know, the devotees had built that kind of, constructed that makeshift kind of temple, but then the municipality came in and knocked it down. Well, you know, they just got some gundas, came in, knocked it down. So Prabhupada just kept fighting. And, you know, in the end he said, oh, that was a good fight. Right? So, you know, how to have that transcendental spirit, even though you're facing what appears to be impossible odds and impossible difficulties, or insurmountable difficulties, right? Still, one has to remain enthusiastic, determined, utsaha, nischayat, dharayat, you know, these qualities have to be maintained. And despite all of the difficulties, all of the problems that might arise, and ultimately keep that idea that, you know, Krishna is behind everything that's happening. It's not the municipality, it's not Tamal Krishna Goswami, it's not Mr. N, right? It's none of those things. Ultimately, that's, you know, behind everything is Krishna in the form of the super soul directing everyone. We have to see that sometimes. We're being harassed, or we're being mistreated, maligned, or whatever, or we're just being told off. We're being told off because we made a mistake. We have to accept that ultimately as Krishna's arrangement, right? That's how. So it requires a transcendental vision to see that ultimately Krishna's behind everything. That's pretty, you know, that's Uttama Adhikari, topmost realization. We have to resort to that even if we don't have that vision. We have to, you know, like Prabhupada advises, we need to see through the eye of Shastra Chakshush. And so the successes have to be seen as Krishna's arrangement, and the setbacks have to be also seen as Krishna's arrangement. And in that setting we have to remain equipoised, ideally. But at the same time we have to know, if there's an opportunity, we should jump. Right? There's an opportunity, grab it. Or if there's a setback, you know, stand and fight. So, Is that okay?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
I'll just add to what he said about this point. I know the stronger devotees, they have realization and they accept the challenge. And also, it's even though they take the risk for Krishna, like Srila Prabhupada,
Yeah.
Other of his god brothers went and they came back, they couldn't do. But Prabhupada, of course he is the chosen one, but he accepted the challenge
Yeah.
and didn't give up. So even though we know, maybe something or the other, it might fail, but he didn't give up. That's the challenge, that Krishna will support that.
Yes. Prabhupada, it's clear that Prabhupada understood who he was and what he was doing. He understood. But at the same time, there were occasions where where it looked like he didn't know what he was doing. Even he himself said, I didn't know when he came off the Jaladudra, he said, I didn't know whether to go left, right, straight. It's like the first time you flew to, Singapore, you left India to go to Singapore, or all of us, by yourself, and you land in the airport and you think, where the hell am I? What do I do next? Where's my passport? Where's my ticket? Where's my money? So, and even Prabhupada, he would go to the Scindia Company's offices to see when the boat was returning back to India. Right. So even though we see Prabhupada was staunchly, stoically, bravely pushing on, at the same time he was also checking out where the boat was going home. So just imagine the emotional the experience that he must have had. Amazing when you think about it. So, yeah. We know that Prabhupada understood what he was doing, but at the same time he had his challenges. So we know what we're doing, but we should also expect challenges. It's not, there's this notion that, I'm a devotee, therefore, Krishna should just roll out a red carpet for me wherever I go, and the seas should part, and the sun should shine. But it's not like that at all. Look at Maharaj Parikshit, for example, right? Or Jad Bharat. Look at the austerity. Look at for him it wasn't, but look at the circumstances and the situations. So, as devotees, we should be prepared for the worst, in one sense, because, as Prabhupada points out in the Bhagavad Gita, that we've declared war on Maya, or we want to escape Maya's clutches, and so therefore she's going to do her darndest to keep us in, or at least reveal to us all of our attachments, right? To keep us in the material world. She's going to show us everything that that we might be distracted by. That's her service, actually, right? Maya's service is to tempt us and to show us all of the things that we're attached to, right? So that we then work on those and purify ourselves of those attachments. So when the going gets tough, we should think, why me? I'm a pure devotee. When obviously we're not, because we find these things come up in the heart when we interact with the material energy. So, but we can be prepared by Krishna's mercy. Actually, there's a very nice article in the latest BTG written by Vishaka about how a devotee is sympathetic or connected to themselves, right? And they know what their they should be aware of their weaknesses, aware of your strengths, but care for themselves in such a way so that when there might be difficulties or challenges or attractions to things impermanent, that they're spiritually strong enough to work through that. Comment?
I think the important point to understand for the devotee is that the devotee always rely on the blessing of Krishna and the mercy of Krishna. So the idea is always to think that, okay, Krishna has a bigger plan by which I can make advancement. So I surrender to the Lord, and wherever He wants me, like Srila Prabhupada, you were saying, he went to America, he didn't know what to do, but in the prayer we said, Srila Prabhupada said, my dear Lord, I'm a puppet in your hand. You want me to dance? I dance.
Yeah.
So in that way, in the mood of surrender, is the point by which our trajectory of our life will change.
Yeah.
Because we are attached to material thinking of immediate situation, temporary situation. But if we are constantly in the mood of surrender to the Lord, then we can see the hand of the Lord behind everything.
Yeah.
Thank you for your wonderful class.
And you know, we can, you know, I know you may have some success. We will have some success, but then the tendency is to be proud of, and so then Krishna will send along a few tests to show that you're not as good as you thought you were. Okay, I think we should finish at this point. What do you reckon? 8:45? Breakfast time. Mahaprashadam ki jai. Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaura Bhaktivedanta ki jai.